The first time Mairead McKenna heard about the silver staircase, she was 13, and convinced that everything wondrous must already have been catalogued by satellites, drones, and historians. Yet her grandmother kept insisting that some miracles hid inside the folds of night. They spoke in the kitchen of a wind-battered house on Ireland's northwest coast, while stars pulsed beyond salt-stained windows. "There's a saga," Granny said, tilting the tea kettle as if pouring legend along with the tea. "It tells of a staircase made of moonlight-bright metal. It descends straight out of the polar lights, only when the aurora is radiant enough to sing. One person, just one each century, is allowed to climb. Reach the top, and you may rewrite a single regret, yours or the world's. That's the bargain, and the price is remembering the life you erased." Mairead laughed then, an adolescent's defence against wonder, but the words etched themselves in her mind with glacial patience. Years slipped forward, carrying her through university, a doctorate in memory studies, and a job at the World Archive, where she stitched stories rescued from the digital rubble of the late 21st century. In 2099, curiosity finally conquered skepticism. Mairead requested a research sabbatical to investigate pre-modern Arctic folklore. The board, needing romantic projects to please donors, approved. She flew to Svalbard on the winter solstice, when night wraps itself around the pole for weeks. Outside the settlement of Longyearbyen, polar bears prowled the frozen shore, and the sky shimmered with ribbons of green, violet, and pale rose. The aurora made her think of a mythic curtain drawn back and forth by unseen hands. At the university's tiny outpost, she met Dr. Ivedautsi, a Sami physicist and storyteller whose beard glinted with ice crystals. He did not laugh when she mentioned her grandmother's saga. Instead, he poured coffee thick as tar and retrieved a weather-worn notebook. "Every 100 years," he murmured, opening to pages crammed with dates, places, names. 1021, 1123, 1220. Always a year or two from the turning of a century, never precisely on the cipher. Each entry coincides with unusual auroral activity, a silver emission line none of our spectrometers can classify. Sometimes local myths record dreamers who vanished or reappeared changed. He traced a finger down to 1999. A Canadian bush pilot named Alice Dumont crashed near Prince of Wales Island. Walked out 3 days later without a scratch, claiming she'd climbed the lights and traded sorrow for silence. Mairead felt goose flesh crawl up her arms. 1999 had already been claimed. The next window, if the pattern held, would open sometime between 2099 and 2103 now. "What if," she asked, voice half a whisper, "the staircase selects rather than invites?" Dr. Urtzi smiled, equal parts gentle and ominous. "Then it has brought you a long way to refuse." That night, a geomagnetic storm blossomed across the magnetosphere. The sky burned so bright the snow glowed turquoise. Instruments howled in protest. Compasses spun. Dr. Urtzi, Mairead, and 2 graduate students snowmobiled toward an abandoned coal mine where the interference was worst. They crested a ridge, and there it was. A staircase of argent-white steps spiraled downward from the pulsating heart of the aurora, hovering a meter above the snow. Each tread looked forged from hammered moonlight, edges hazed with sparks. The structure did not fade when clouds drifted across the stars. Rather, it leaned into existence harder, as if refusing to be erased. "No drone has ever photographed it," Dr. Urtzi said. "Electronic eyes render it as static. Flesh and blood eyes, those are different." Mairead's breath clouded in front of her. Her pulse hammered in her ears. She thought about regret, the rule of one. Quietly, she checked her pockets, notebook, graphite stylus, a photograph of her sister Aisling. Aisling, who had drowned in the Dublin floods of 2087 when levees burst during the hurricane. Mairead, working at the archive, had ignored her sister's frantic hollow call, too absorbed in curating memories of strangers to answer the living voice that needed her. Aisling's last message, found later, begged, "Just tell me what to do." Mairead had buried that memory beneath decades of scholarship. Now it throbbed like a wound under scar tissue. Wind rattled the ridge, ice sung against visor glass. Dr. Utsi squeezed Mairead's shoulder. "No one else," he said, "can go. The story grants passage to one dreamer. What happens if I refuse? The staircase returns to light. Another century passes. Another regret abides." She took a step forward, snow crunching. The staircase's lowest tread met her boots with impossible warmth. The world dropped away, sound blurred into a high chime of metal on wind. She climbed. Each step removed a layer of gravity's insistence. 30 treads up. She no longer heard snowmobiles or storm. Aurora swirled around her like the inside of a giant shell. Hues deepening, colors she didn't know names for. The staircase twisted horizontally, then vertically, and she walked as naturally as if the universe had redefined direction. At the top was not a summit, but a door of mirrored ice. It opened before her. She entered a circular chamber so vast she could not see its far rim. The floor resembled diamond dust, glittering with trapped constellations. Pillars of pale metal held nothing except themselves. In the center waited a figure, genderless, tall, skin silvered like the steps. "Welcome, dreamer," it said, voice layered, child, elder, wind. Whale song. "You walk the saga of the silver staircase. One regret, one century. Speak." Mairead's throat tightened, yet curiosity fought fear. "Who are you?" "Not the author, only the librarian. Regrets are stories with teeth. Someone must shelve them after they bite." Lights fluttered overhead, coalescing into 21 scenes, one per century since the first. Mairead glimpsed an Inuit shaman returning a lost child to life, a crusader sparing an enemy he once slew, a Ming Dynasty poet retrieving a burnt scroll, a suffragette choosing words braver than silence. Alice Dumont steering clear of the storm that had killed 4 comrades in the timeline Mairead remembered. Each vision flickered, then settled into a star suspended in the dome. So many altered threads, so many unknowable consequences. "Were their trades worth it?" she asked. "For each, yes, or they could not have climbed," the librarian replied. "But sorrow displaced is not sorrow destroyed. History reshapes, finds new fault lines. Why allow any change then? Because regret, too, is part of the cosmos. It seeks equilibrium. Granting one catharsis per cycle keeps the rest of humanity's grief from tearing itself apart." Mairead considered the photograph in her palm. Aisling grinning, sunburned, hair whipped by seaside wind. The flood that killed her had also sparked a continental investment in seawall redesign, saving millions later. If Mairead chose to answer the call, perhaps Aisling lived. But maybe budget urgency faded, leading to greater catastrophe elsewhere. The knot of moral calculus tightened until her chest ached. She thought of her work at the archive, rescuing memories, not rewriting them. Yet she still woke nights crying, "I'm sorry, Aisling." The librarian watched in silence, giving her the dignity of indecision. Mairead tried a different angle. "What if my regret isn't personal? One regret only. Scale is irrelevant. The price remains. You remember the life that was, while the world forgets. Loneliness beyond measure." Years of studying memory had taught her how resilient, how fragile, and how hungry the mind could be. She imagined carrying 2 timelines in her skull, one where her sister drowned, one where she lived. She imagined walking city streets alive with differences no one else noticed. She could bear loneliness for Aisling, but could she bear it if the change worsened things? She had no model to test, no simulation. Mairead turned slowly, absorbing the chamber. On the far side, she noticed another shape-a-second door, made of roiling twilight, unlit until now. It pulsed, invited. "What is that?" "A path unwalked," the librarian said. "Should you wish to forsake the power to rewrite, you may cross it and learn the truth of every regret retained. Knowledge without the authority to alter. Few choose it. Why? Their pain seeks erasure, not explanation." She tried to picture carrying unchanged regret, armed only with deeper understanding. Such understanding might let her teach others how to live with sorrow, instead of pretending sorrow could be fixed. Her grandmother's voice drifted back. Miracles hide inside the folds of night. But Granny had never promised miracles were antiseptics. Sometimes they were magnifying glasses. Mairead approached the twilight door. As she neared, its surface clarified into rippling images. Her 13-year-old self laughing in the kitchen, Aisling filming a silly dance, the floodwater smashing through barriers. Aisling's terrified face on the frozen holocaust. Mairead's stomach clenched. Yet there were other memories too. Aisling's volunteer work designing modular shelters for refugees, her commitment to climate justice. If Aisling had survived, maybe she would have done more good. Or less. Or different. There was no solving the math. She glanced back at the staircase through the ice door, ghostly behind her. So easy to step back, climb further, rewrite the call. A single regret offered to the hungry void, and the sister she loved might breathe again. The temptation howled. But memory studies had also taught her about counterfactual obsession. Change one node in the network and waves of causality ripple outward until the shoreline of prediction crumbles. She would never know the whole aftermath. The librarian's lonely eyes confirmed it. Mairead inhaled the cold, bright air. "Show me," she asked. "Aisling's life, if she survives." The librarian raised a hand. A panel of light manifested. Aisling, alive, older, standing on a Bangkok seawall in 2109, holding a banner demanding governments evacuate coastal slums. Her voice cracked from speeches, yet she smiled. Flash 2109. 12. She addressed the United Oceanic Assembly, pushing for carbon-negative shipping routes. Flash 2116. She returned to Dublin to mourn lives lost after a typhoon overwhelmed an underfunded Seawall 1, whose budget had been compromised in 2088 when public panic over the floods never reached its previous height. Mairead's knees weakened. The death toll was lower than history's original flood catastrophes, higher in some neighborhoods. Net gain? Net loss? How to quantify lives, how to weigh them against the warmth of one sister's hugs. The librarian dimmed the vision. "This is probability, not certainty," they cautioned. "Fate is a weather system." Mairead thought of her archivist oath. Preserve without bias. She bowed her head. "I choose not to rewrite," she said. The librarian's silver eyes widened, almost tender with relief or sorrow, she could not tell. "Then you wish the knowledge of regrets retained?" "Yes. If I can't erase the ache, I can learn it. Teach with it. Maybe help others hold their grief. Brave and unpopular. Story of my career," she quipped, though her voice quivered. The librarian gestured, and the twilight door brightened. "Beyond lies the archive of unaltered sorrows. Enter, and the staircase returns to the sky. Your century's wish will be marked as abstained." Mairead hesitated. What happens if 2 centuries in a row abstain? "The cosmos will endure. Grief does not evaporate, but compassion adapts." She exhaled and stepped through. Darkness folded around her like velvet. Then light blossomed, rows upon rows of crystalline bookshelves, stretching into eternity. Each shard of crystal contained a swirling image. The moment of someone's regret, an ember of what, if glowing inside. She touched one, and memories cascaded through her like river water over stone. A Roman centurion sending a beloved home to die alone, an astronaut too slow to tether a drifting crewmate, a farmer selling land to a corporation that poisoned wells. Each regret distinct, each binding humanity together in shared fallibility. Time lost meaning. She learned languages by absorbing remorse, histories by licking the salt of other people's tears. She saw how some regrets led to awakenings, reforms, friendships forged across trauma. Others festered like gangrene. She studied patterns, cross-referenced them, built theories. She was still Mairead, but enlarged. Eventually the librarian's voice returned, a far-off bell. "Dreamer, your body remains mortal. You must go home or perish here." "Home," she whispered, though it felt like stepping out of infinity. The chamber condensed into one luminous point, then exploded into the aurora. She found herself descending the silver staircase, arms heavy with invisible tomes of sorrow. Snow whirled at her feet. Dr. Utsi and the students watched, eyes wide. Mairead reached the ground. The staircase withdrew, treads sliding upward until nothing remained but ordinary light. Then the aurora faded into dull green murmurs. Dr. Utsi hurried forward, catching her elbow. "Did you take the bargain?" "No," she said. Her voice sounded older. "I took the lesson." They guided her back to the outpost. Over the following weeks, while instruments recalibrated and weather calmed, Mairead filled data logs with insights on coping rituals, communal mourning, narrative therapy. She proposed creating an international curriculum called the Cartography of Regret to teach children and policymakers alike how to integrate error without paralysis. The Sami physicist sent the proposal to colleagues. Momentum grew. She returned to the World Archive bearing a crate of notebooks. When colleagues asked about her Arctic sabbatical, she described new frameworks for memorial architecture, empathy training, restorative justice. She never mentioned her sister's call or the silver staircase. Some nights she still woke drenched in sweat, the echo of Aisling's plea ringing inside. She wept, breathed, wrote. Slowly, sorrow became a compass rather than an anchor. In 2101, the Cartography of Regret curriculum piloted in 5 countries. Suicide rates among disaster survivor adolescents fell by 8%. Conflict resolution councils reported greater participation. None of these metrics filled the empty space at Mairead's family table, but they illuminated other tables around the globe. On the 10th anniversary of the flood, Mairead stood on Dublin's rebuilt levee taller, greener, embedded with tidal energy panels. She placed yellow roses in the water. Wind carried sea spray into her hair. Tourists snapped photos of the modern barrier, unaware of lives sacrificed to fabricate urgency. Merritt whispered, "I'm sorry, Aisling. I love you." The tide answered with a hush of brine. Far to the north, winter's first aurora brushed the horizon. Faint silver threads lost amid city glare. Merritt looked up and imagined the staircase hidden inside, folded away until 2199. She wondered what regrets would accumulate by then, and whether the next dreamer would erase or embrace. She hoped they would have her notebooks to guide them, yet she never presumed to judge. Regret was personal, thick as blood, light as breath. The saga of the silver staircase would continue, century after century, shimmering in the sky's deepest ink. Some would choose to climb and change history. Others would choose to learn and carry memory forward. And humanity, stumbling but unbroken, would weave both choices into its endless story. That night, back in her apartment, Mairead filed her newest reflections into the archive. She titled the document simply, Auroral Ethics, Preliminary Notes. Inside, she wrote, "We are not defined solely by the regrets we rewrite, nor by those we let stand. We are defined by the questions we dare to ask while standing on the threshold between pain and possibility. The staircase descends for each of us in quieter forms. A phone call unanswered, a promise half kept, a chance to listen. We do not always need magic to choose well. Sometimes we only need to remember that choice exists. She saved the file, commended it to tomorrow, and turned off the lights. Outside, clouds gathered, promising rain. She opened the window, welcoming the scent of ozone. Somewhere in the dark, 1,000 unaltered sorrows rustled their wings, and Mairead listened. Archivist, dreamer, custodian of regret, ready to translate their ache into wisdom, while the century breathed around her, waiting for its next dreamer to decide what wonder meant.